there's this image that everyone else is having sex and I'm not. All the stats show that people are having less and less sex. Great sex is a byproduct of great connection and intimacy. It's not a replacement for or a source of.
So let's talk about sex.
Mm-hmm.
Sex is a huge part of relationships.
Yeah.
And one of the really interesting things I want to talk to you about is, if I look at my friendship group, my small friendship group of maybe 6 guys, right? My best friends, I'd say 3 of them are currently having a really, really hard time as it relates to sex with their partner, for a variety of reasons. Reason number 1 that I've heard, my partner doesn't like having sex. We have sex once every 3 months. Reason number 2 I've heard, my partner doesn't like the way that I have sex. On those first 2 points, I'm horrified, surprised that so many people I speak to are struggling in that department with sex.
Yeah.
And there's not, the conversation around sex is either non-existent or porn influenced.
Yeah.
What's your take on sex and what's going on in the world?
I'm so glad you brought it up because I think that because of social media, there's this image that everyone else is having sex and I'm not. Like, I feel like that's like a very big feeling that a lot of people have. And all the stats show that people are having less and less sex. There are more and more sexless relationships and marriages every single year. And it's so much more common. Yet in our groups and online, everyone feels like, oh, they're getting some and they're getting some and they're getting some, but I'm not. And the truth is most people are not getting any. And that's just, I don't have the stats offhand right now, but whenever I've looked at the trends, that's what the trends show. To me, it comes back down to everything we've just been talking about. Sexual chemistry and attraction and connection is all based on A, how someone feels about themselves. If someone themselves is not feeling taken care of by themselves, attractive, investing in themselves, growing, feeling like they're becoming more and better, it's very unlikely that they're going to want to share their body, mind, emotions, and heart with anyone else in the most physically intimate way, which is sex. It's just unlikely. And chances are, if you don't think you're having those conversations you want to have with your partner, where you are being open, where they are working on their values, where we do see each other striving, chances are that you're not going to want to have sex with them either. And so what we're seeing is that the challenge we're having in sex is actually coming from everything else that's going on. That there isn't a sense of growth, joy, purpose. Like, great sex is a byproduct of great connection and intimacy. It's not a replacement for or a source of. If I asked everyone who's listening right now, put your hand up if you've had amazing sex but no connection in a relationship, right? Like, that's been real. We've all used sex as a crutch. We've had relationships where every time we argued we had sex, it solved the problem. Every time something was going wrong, we had sex, it was figured out somehow. And the studies show that the chemicals released during sex make you feel like you're getting closer, even though you're not actually emotionally closer. So when you look at all of the stats, when you look at all the research, when you look at everything we've just described, sex is a byproduct of a healthy individual and a healthy individual and a growing individual and a growing individual coming together, sorting out their differences, having the fights they need to have, having the conversations they do, that naturally creates vulnerability, which leads to being able to expose ourselves at the deepest, most physical way that we possibly can. How can you expose yourself that vulnerably if you can't even have a vulnerable conversation with your partner because you just switch on the TV every night and avoid that difficult conversation? It
becomes like a transaction.
It becomes a transaction. And then sex becomes, in the best case, a crutch and a hopeful aspiration on a special night or whatever it may be, or something we wait for and plan for and it never works out. As opposed to, in the worst case, it just becomes something we're both not talking about, comfortable about, or even doing. And so,
or an obligation.
Exactly. Like an obligation. And like someone's just sitting there, like, you know,
come on, 3 minutes.
Literally. All right, let's get it over and done with. Like that mindset. And I'm like, there isn't, because we've lost intimacy in relationships. There is no intimacy. And so you can't force it physically.
There's no intimacy in porn.
There's no intimacy in porn for sure.
They don't like do the small talk. I don't pay for that.
Exactly. There's no intimacy in porn. There's no, and the problem is, and this is, you know, the book starts with this quote, but it solves this problem very very neatly and carefully. And it's this idea that the Buddha was once approached and asked, what's the difference between I like you and I love you? Which is a brilliant question. And the Buddha replied, when you like a flower, you simply pluck it. But when you love a flower, you water it every day. And to me, the one night stand, the porn, the dopamine hit, the release of chemical is the plucking, right? That's what we're all plucking all day long because that's all we can do. But the watering, the intimacy, developing intimacy, growing from entertainment to experiments, to experiences, to education, to engaging in service together, all of this creates so much intimacy that physical intimacy is a natural byproduct. It's not something you have to manage or engineer or manufacture. Like, it's not this separate thing. It's based on how close I feel to you. And the point is, we don't feel close to our partners because we don't do anything that makes us closer every day. Sleeping in the same bed as someone does not make you close to someone. Living in the same house as someone does not make you close to someone. The only thing that makes you feel close to someone is when you feel you can be open and when you feel seen, heard, and understood in your most vulnerable, darkest, and open times. If you can do that, everything else is going to work. But if you can't do that, you can't just make it happen in a moment because you're meant to be together. You're meant to be in love.
What about masturbation? Do you think masturbation to porn helps or hurts relationships?
I think in the long term, it hurts. I think it's unhealthy because it's an avoidance and an escape, right? That's the point. It's like, what is it being used as? It's not being used as self-connection or self-understanding. It's being used as escape and avoidance of the actual topic. And all that's doing is rewiring your brain for false expectations, diminishing returns as well. All the studies that I did look at show that porn is making you work harder. You're going to have to find something more extreme. All the stats that I saw showed that you had to watch more extreme porn to get the same feeling. So the most searched porn and the most watched porn was abusive, sometimes violent, sometimes rough, hardcore. All the search terms were more extreme to get the same feeling because of the diminishing returns of the chemicals that are being released. And so now you're rewiring your brain to not feel as much pleasure from normal sex or more traditional, conventional sex. You're now saying that I'm only going to feel pleasure from sex when it's potentially abusive, violent, somewhat rough, hardcore, whatever else it may be. So I think that's massively unhealthy.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.